People of the internet. Ooh, why God allows suffering? Let's hear this, bro. Why God allows suffering? This comes from, I don't know this gentleman, Noland Arbaugh. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Lex Friedman, of course. I'm a huge fan of Lex Friedman, as I've said before. This, of course, 100% piques my interest. Let's hear what these gentlemen have to say in regards to why God allows suffering.
Did you ever make sense of why God puts good people through such hardship?
Oh man. I think it's all about understanding how much we need God. And I don't think that there's any light without the dark. I think that if all of us were happy all the time, there would be, no reason to turn to God ever.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there would be no concept of, good or bad. And I think that as much of like the darkness and the evil that's in the world, it makes us all appreciate the good and the things we have so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like when I had my accident, one of the first things I said to one of my best friends was, and this was within like the first month or two after my accident, I said, everything about this accident has just made me understand and believe that like God is real and that there really is a God, basically, and that like my interactions with him have all been, real and worthwhile. And he said, if anything, seeing me go through this accident, he believes that there isn't a God. And it's a very different reaction. But I believe that it is a way for God to test us, to build our character, to send us through trials and tribulations, to make sure that we understand how precious, he is, and the things that he's given us and the time that he's given us, and then to hopefully grow from all of that. I think that's a huge part of being here, is to not just, have an easy life and do everything that's easy, but to step out of our comfort zones and really challenge ourselves, because I think that's how we grow.
Interesting. So let's speak on it, man. Why does God allow suffering? Of course, was the question posed by Lex Friedman. As I mentioned, I don't know who Noland Arbaugh is. Of course, I know a quick Google search could figure that out for me. But just going off the context of that clip, right? So, of course, he seemed to be what they would call, I guess, paraplegic. He looked, of course, as if he was in a wheelchair or has, suffered some form of disability, whatever the case is. And he tells a story about how he looked at his accident as grateful. He found, I guess, resolve or appreciation, a greater appreciation for God, while he had a friend that saw that same accident, of course, of his, and interpreted as there being no God. The one thing that I kind of took away from that, man, which I can, definitely attest to, because of course, that's the biggest argument on the side of the atheists or the non-believers, the same thing, whatever the case is, in regards to them, one of their strongest arguments is that God allows suffering. God kills babies. God allows war. God, does X, Y, and Z. That doesn't sound like a just God. That doesn't sound like a fair God, yada, yada, yada. And I hear that, man. And I hear that. It's a valid claim. Even, why do bad things happen to good people? You hear that all the time as well, too. You have people that are so righteous and praying and praising God and worshiping God, but yet they also feel hardship and struggles, whatever the case is. People question the authenticity or the morale of God. Me personally, folks, of course, I'm no stranger or not ashamed to admit my faith in a higher power. Of course, as I usually say on this channel, I don't necessarily give my allegiance to any specific religion, but I do practice spirituality and that personal relationship. I think that's forefront. I put that at the forefront, in terms of having that one-on-one relationship with a higher source, right? Just kind of understanding that there's something greater than me, right? I think a lot of the backlash that comes to this whole debate, of course, is there a God, religion, this, that, and the other, of course, that when we do have, people are able to build more and more cases against, there being the existence of God, because they're seeing things that are happening within the church. They're seeing how Christians act, quote unquote. They're seeing how Muslims act. They're seeing that holy wars are started in the name of God. But at the same time, there's senseless killings in the midst of that. So I can see how one might start to question things and wonder, hey, does he really love me? Is there a God? This, that, and the other, whatever the case is, yada, yada, yada. One of the points the gentleman brought up as well, too, man, that I thought about as well, too, which I can attest to and I think kind of helps as well, too, is that if everything was all good and dandy, is that the quality of life? Is that a life that says, oh, that's the type of God I know, if he made everything all right for me, if everything is happy? And would you be appreciative of it? If you've never dealt hardship, it reminds me of a 50 Cent lyric, man. I think it was it. What song was it? I forget which song. 21 Questions, I think it was. Some. And he says, joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. Joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain, right? So if you had no contrast to compare against, how would you know? Would you be appreciative of it, or would you take it for granted? Right? You ever been hungry, damn near starving? Oh man, I ain't eat all day, man. I ain't eat nothing all day. But then you get a chance to get a hot meal, and it tastes like one of the best things you've ever had ever. You appreciate that meal that much more because you know what hunger feels like. If you've never felt hunger, you would take it for granted. You would think that was something that was supposed to be granted to you. Well, I'm always supposed to be able to eat in this, that, and the other. And of course, yeah, hunger is a difficult thing. But you appreciate that meal a lot more, right? If you're driving home, cold blizzard, cold winter day, and you have the luxury of being able to go home, turn on your heater, get in your nice warm bed under your nice warm covers, but then on your way home you saw a homeless man on the street. Are you not that much more grateful for that home and that provision? Because again, if you knew no such thing as a homeless man, or if you've never felt cold, whatever the case is, you would maybe take those things for granted, in my personal opinion. So I see that, man. Yeah, it's a difficult concept. Of course, these are just my anecdotal takes. This is just how I rationalize there being a higher being. And like a previous video I was speaking on as well, too, where they're talking about embracing challenges, man. Challenges are a key way to develop your character. Makes you appreciative, man. Triumph, to prevail against adversity. Feels good. It adds to character development. It builds character. It builds confidence. So I think, maybe you might say in a strange way, that's why maybe God allows suffering. Because we all have free will. I guess essentially that's a whole nother topic as well, too. If there's free will, is it fate? What are the cases? But for the most part, we feel as if we have the right to make our own decisions, right? So in that context, of course, if you feel as if there's free will and all your decisions that you're making are yours and you're cognizant and you are aware, like, hey, I'm making this decision, I know right from wrong, this, that, and the other, then yeah, one could argue that, hey, man, God has given you that to be able to decipher between right and wrong. So if you've seen evil and know that you don't want to be a part of evil, then you're that much more prone to doing good. And it's almost like reverse psychology in its own way, if that makes sense, right? It's just my thought, at least, right? And of course, I'd love to hear your take down in the comment section below as well, too. Like, what do you make of that? Why do you think God allows suffering if you believe in God? Again, of course, I never come off as the most religious person or somebody that knows, the inner workings of the world or why the things the way they are. But of course, when I had these thoughts to myself and I kind of rationalized things, I put things in perspective like that. If somebody was to ask me, why does God allow suffering? I would say, honestly, in my opinion, I think suffering is a thing because there's lessons that can be learned through suffering. There's a greater appreciation. Gratitude can be learned through suffering. Right? I've been in some situations in my life, man, personally speaking, man, where it's just like, I am grateful for the opportunity that I have right now because it wasn't always like this. You see what I'm saying? Everything that you see me doing, of course, the abilities that I have, a roof over my head, food to eat, the car you drive, this, that, and the other, wasn't always like that. So I can think back to areas in my life when, man, I felt hunger before. I felt lost before. But I can be proud to say that, progression, perseverance allowed me to get to where I'm at now. Not even to act like I've, quote unquote, made it, but grace has allowed me to get to a stage right now where it's just like, man, I am grateful and I'm appreciative of everything I have now because of the things that I persevered through before. That's the only way I can only rationalize it, man. I know that might sound philosophical and poetic, right? But that's how I rationalize it in my head, to be completely honest. Suffering is a thing, so that way we could be appreciative of the things that we do have. And whether sometimes when we don't see suffering within our own lives, but we see suffering in somebody else's lives, you're appreciative of what you have, right? So if you see somebody, a colleague, a family member, friends, whatever the case is, going through certain things, and that may not be your personal situations, you're that much more appreciative of what you do have. Because again, if everything was all good and dandy, then we would take things for granted. If food, that's where gluttony and things come in. If we always had access to food and always had access to everything we want, I see a world where we'll just be arrogant and gluttonous because we think we're entitled to that. We're owed that. Like, oh yeah, man, I'm always happy. I'm always this. No adversity, right? What did they say? Good times make weak men. Good times make weak men. I didn't come up with that saying. That's a saying that came from, I forgot who came up with it. Good times make weak men. Difficult times make strong men. Challenges add to character development. Suffering builds strength. It builds character. Of course, at least that's the mindset you should embrace to persevere through your suffering. Everything that you're going through in your life right now, if it's a difficult situation, look at it as an opportunity to grow. Again, you don't go to the gym and put on the lightest weights, right? Are you growing? You don't go to the gym, get on the treadmill for 30 seconds and get off and feel like you did something. Nah, you need that weight. You need that resistance. You need that friction to actually grow. That's my thoughts, folks. I want to hear yours down in the comment section, man. Why does God allow suffering? Why is there such suffering in this world? Why is there hardship in this world? Why are there difficulties in this world, man? And what are some things that you use to persevere? Are you not that much more grateful for the things that you do have when you have felt like you've beat that level or overcome that difficult moment in your life, to see where you were then, to see where you were now? Do you not feel that much more stronger or that more, liberated to help somebody else during their hard times because you too have seen some difficulties in your life? I think that's how we kind of look at it. At least that's how I rationalize it in my brain.